All right, so this is kind of where I left it off last time. So one of the things that you want to start doing kind of as early as basically as I start modeling stuff, I always want to see what the end picture is. So don't get too focused on a chair or a desk or a bench or a wall without looking at the big picture, without looking at what the end result is going to be. Sometimes we'll sit there and we'll be too focused in on this one particular item that we won't look at anything else. So like one of my students before, they spent, I don't know, a week and a half modeling a typewriter. Every single key that should be there and every trigger that should be there and every mechanical piece. So it turned out to be a nice typewriter, but then it was in the room really far away and you couldn't really see it, okay? So you don't want to do that. You want to be always looking at what the end process is going to be. So one of the things that I always do is I render out typically 2 passes outside of Maya, okay? So it's basically like every scene is going to have at least these 2 passes. Once you get into industry and you're working at some of the bigger companies, they'll be rendering out like dozens of passes, all right? So what a pass is it allows us to basically get different information. So here is a Z depth, and it might be kind of hard to see. Yeah, it's kind of hard to see. Somewhere on here I have lens effects. No, not lens effects. I want one of these allows me to see my color correction. There we go. Come on. Nope. Alright, well it's not showing it here, but obviously we could see this in a second anyway. So this is my Z depth, and basically what this allows me to do is see the depth from my camera to where my objects are laying, okay? So right here in the front it's really dark, and then further back it's a bit whiter. So that's my Z depth. And then my other one that I have here is the ambient occlusion. And we've kind of talked about these before too. So the ambient occlusion is basically where your objects are coming in contact or getting close to each other. You're going to get these darker lines. So sometimes they'll call this like a clay pass or a putty pass. In V-Ray it's actually called a dirt pass, which is kind of weird. So if I go, just so you can see how to do this, in V-Ray you go to your render elements, and for the Z depth you go down here to Z depth and you just double click it and it adds it. For the ambient occlusion you click on the extra texture and it creates the extra texture tab, and then you just map. So I click the map button and I map a V-Ray dirt to this, okay? Now depending on what settings you have here will make, oh I closed it. Did I close it? I did. Will make your stuff either more apparent or less apparent. So if I send this to, let's say, my radius of 2, we'll make that really, really sharp. And then I render this out again, what it's going to do is it's going to render my ambient occlusion a bit tighter. Or it should. I don't see it really affecting it yet. Okay, so what it should be doing is this area of 10, there it goes. You can see how wide this is and how gray it is. What the size of 2 is going to do is it's going to compress this so that basically an object, once it's further than 2 units away, is not going to have any ambient occlusion effect on it. So you can see how much darker these areas are going to be and how much whiter these areas are going to be. Now your goal in any time you do an ambient occlusion is to get a nice range there. You don't want it to be too gray or too black or too white. You want to have just a good range, and part of this, like I said, is the trial and error. When you first start modeling stuff, even before you put a texture on it, you can start doing these little renders because you know that I'm going to be using ambient occlusion, I'm going to be using my depth, okay? A nice thing about V-Ray is that as it's rendering, you can preview all of your stuff. So I can preview what my RGB looks like, I can preview the alpha, I can see my my ambient occlusion, and I can preview the depth, okay? So I'm just going to hit escape here. So that's how you would add that inside of V-Ray. You could also go to the depth switch here, and this is the depth, okay? So like I said, it's measuring the distance from the camera to your objects, okay? Now what it does is imagine that there is a range, And that range is right there, 0 to, I think it says 1,000. Yeah, 0 to 1,000. So basically what's happening is the reason that I didn't have a whole lot of contrast in my depth pass is because here's 0, here's 1,000. So basically this is black, this is white, and my scene is way over here. Okay, so that's what it's doing. So what I want to do is take that range and drag it or shrink it so that it fits my scene better. So if I set this to like, I don't know, 200, and then I did a rendering of this, and then we looked at the depth, what we'd be able to see is that my depth is now going to be more white and more black inside the scene, a bit more visible is what's going on, okay? So you always want to find the good settings that are going to make your scene really pop and really stand out. Okay, so you can definitely see I'm getting more of this. And the depth is good for a couple things. One, it's good for depth. Okay, when we bring it into our compositing program, we can use this as a way to create depth of field. I can say this object is in focus, this object is blurry, and there we go. That's what we can use it for. We can also use it as an atmospheric effect. Okay, so if I wanted this to feel like it's kind of foggy out, like let's say this is just right after dawn, the sun just broke, and it's still kind of like foggy and misty out, I can use this as a way to enhance my visual. Okay, so don't look at any of these as a way to, like, depth is just for depth and ambient occlusion is just for ambient occlusion. These things are used as ways to isolate certain elements. Okay, so you can see here the change in my coloration. All right, so I'm going to close that one because it's taking a while. Now let's say I'm doing this in Mental Ray. So I'm just going to grab everything and just throw a Mental Ray shader on it just so I can see it. Obviously not my lights, that doesn't make sense. Mental Ray, Mila, there we go. Okay. So now in Mental Ray, there is a Scene tab, and in the Scene tab are passes. And these are all different kinds of passes that you could send out. Way on the bottom, here's our depth. Here's our ambient occlusion. Okay, and then we render it again. Now, unlike V-Ray, I have to wait until the entire image is done before I see anything, before I see my ambient occlusion, before I see my depth. Okay, so this is, even though it's looking white, the only reason it's looking white is because there's no textures on it. It's just the flat material. Okay, you can see there are some shadows in the scene, kind of. I really don't have any lights. I'm going to go to my load render passes here under File, and then look at the depth. And now this one is going to be super white. The reason that this one is super white is because it doesn't correct it. Okay, so what Mental Ray is doing is it's actually saving out the distance. So if I have an object 20 units from my camera, it's saving that object out as basically a 20 pixel bright image. Okay, so we can't see it here. I can adjust my exposure. If I pull this down, there we go. Okay, as I pull this down, you can see the effect of it. You can see how we're getting that fog in there, and you can see the depth where something that's close is here and something that is further away is over there. Okay, these are not just pixels, these are not just color, it's actually information, it's actually data. This pixel back here, Maya's actually rendering out and saying this pixel is 200 units from the camera. That's what that's saying there. Okay, now if I go to my layer and I go to ambient occlusion and I reset this, that's obviously way too big. There's my ambient occlusion, and you can see this one looks obviously a bit more gray than the other one did, so I can go and adjust it. So if I go to my render settings, I go down to my distance, this is where I can put in a distance. If you have anything set to 0 in Maya, typically it means figure it out for yourself. So that's what it's doing, and that's why it turned out so gray. So if I set it to 2 and I render it, we should get something very similar to what we had when we did our V-Ray one the second time. Okay, render pass, ambient occlusion. So not exactly similar, but pretty close to what we had before. Okay, so you can see here we're really helping the colors pop more. Okay, by having those lines there, we're really helping drag out some of those contact shadows. All right. So now there's other stuff we may want to do too, which we'll get into in a second. All right. So one of the programs that you need to learn if you're going to stay in this area is Nuke. Okay, and Nuke is great because it's procedural, and what that means is you do something one time, and then you can save what you just did and apply it a million times more. Okay, so imagine you went into Photoshop and you imported your document, you drew a circle around it, you darkened this area, and then you went to the hue and saturation and you played with that, and you went to the levels and you played with that, and you went to this other thing and you played with that. And then your boss says, okay, now I have these 30 other images you have to do this to. You basically have to redo everything you just did 30 more times. Okay, you could create an action obviously in Photoshop, but that's not as easy as what we're going to show here. Okay, so in Nuke, the layout is pretty simple. The people who made Mari also make Nuke, but Nuke is a better interface than Mari is. You'll see. So here's our viewport. Okay, so this is what we see. So if we were in After Effects, this is what the end result would be. This over here is our properties. So this is all the settings that we're going to change. This is our work area. Okay, now this is a node-based work area, workspace. So what that means is that as we create objects, we are basically going to be dropping other items underneath it and creating a chain of events that will happen. So when we go and adjust colors, what it does is it reads the first chain, the second chain, the third chain, the fourth chain, and it goes straight down this line every time we need to adjust something. Okay, and then all the stuff over here are our tools. Now here's one thing that's awesome about Nuke is that you can hit the tab key and you can type in whatever you want. Here's a grade, a grade node. Here is a keyer. Okay, so if you know what you need to add, you can just type it in and then it'll pop it up. Initially, you may not know what's even available, so you may find yourself jumping over here to grab stuff. Okay, so I'm just gonna, for just a second here, I'm just gonna create a color bars. Okay, so this is your create menu. I'm gonna say color bars. So here are the color bars. Now I can't see the color bars because they're not hooked up to the viewer. Okay, just that alone is something people usually struggle with. Once you get it, it's like no big deal. So I'm just going to drag this arrow right to the color bars, and then I can see the color bars. Okay, I drag it off, the color bars go away, no big deal. Okay, I can also click on this and hit the number 1, and it'll connect my color bars to the viewer as input number 1. I could drag it off, and there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my footage. So I'm going to go up here and go to read. You can see the hotkey is R. And I'm going to go find my footage. So it's on the P drive, it's on Sarcona, it's on 2520, it's on work. I have this other environment that I'm going to bring in. And perspective. Oops. I don't want to bring in a sequence, so I'm just going to open this up. And I'm going to grab, let's say, number 10 here. Okay. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to connect it to my viewer. So I hit number 1. Oops, that's not number 1. There it is. So this is a scene that I did before in a different version of Maya. Okay, but similar stuff. Here we go. All right. So if I wanted to see, right now I'm looking at what this image looks like. So basically, if you were to open the image in Photoshop, this is what you would see. I can adjust my colors a smidge just by going like this, just to make it brighter for you guys right now, because I'm sure it's darker up on the screen. And if I want to see what my channels were, I can go to this arrow. And when I go to this arrow, I can look at the alpha channel, which right now there's none. I can look at my ambient occlusion. Okay, now it's super bright because of this, so I'm just going to click that to bring it back so I can see the ambient occlusion. I can go to my depth, and here's my depth. And if I crank this down even further, there it is. Barely, you can barely see it, right? There. Okay, so there's my depth. All right. Now here's where you'll find that Nuke is 20 times better than Photoshop. Okay, Nuke is not a drawing program. Photoshop is a drawing program. You can do photo color corrections in Nuke. You can do color adjustments and all that stuff inside Nuke. But here's some stuff that you don't get inside of something like Photoshop. Do you see where my mouse is? Just kind of like in the middle of this red. To our eye, that looks like it's all the same red. But look below it where you see the red, green, and blue numbers. Watch as I move my mouse over stuff. Do you see how the red number is changing? Yes? Okay. So what it's doing is it's telling us that's how far from the camera that specific object is. So if I were to crank this down again, oops, wrong one. Like that, and I were to crank this down, you would see that that specific item is 97 units away from the camera. As I bring my mouse closer, this pixel is 37 units away from the camera. Okay? Now that may not mean anything really to you right now, but think about this. You have colors, right? So in Photoshop, you have red, green, and blue. And each one of those colors, you have 255 different values. Okay? You've heard that before in Intro to Photoshop class, I'm sure. So what that means is we don't have decimal points. Okay? We have basically single digits. So you have 1 unit, 2 units, 3 units. This number is not 37, it's 37.0534. I'm going to zoom in really close too, just so I can really get some different numbers here. So you can see how this is incrementally changing. This rendering is actually a 32-bit image, which means it's saving basically trillions of bits of data into each pixel, okay, or into each image. So I have a lot more color range on here. And what that gives us is a lot more accuracy. So if I didn't have that, if I had basically a single, an 8-bit image, none of this would work, okay? Because basically something might be on an angle, and the front of it might be at 35, and the back of it might be at 36, and the middle of it's just going to decide whether it's 35 or 36. With this, it'll actually give us a range of how far each pixel is from the camera. So we're talking about millions and millions and millions of different values just for my red channel. Okay, so that's really important. I also have an Incandescent Pass, and you can see what this is it's all my screens. I wanted my screens to have some sort of glow to them, and on the original image they don't. And there's a reason they don't, is because I don't want them to on my original image, because I want to be able to adjust it. I want to be able to go in there and say, this should be bright, this should be dim, okay? I want to go also to my indirect, and this is, what did I do this one for? I don't think this one is anything. I need to brighten it. I went the wrong way. Yeah, this was just like an extra thing I threw in there. I don't need that one. Okay. So all of these passes are basically stored inside of one file. And if I go to where this is at, here, there, nope, there, there. Okay, these are all my test renders, and they're all about 21 megabytes, okay? Because they're all 16-bit images, they're all basically huge images. They're not 2 megabytes or 3 megabytes. They're huge images, okay? But it allows us to do a lot more with it. So let's say that I wanted to make my image a bit brighter, okay? So I'm going to click on my image here, and I'm going to go and find grade. Now, I believe grade is inside of this one, grade. Okay, so a little pie wedge one that separates the red, green, and blue. I go to grade, and there it is. Grade is very similar to like your levels inside of Photoshop. And all I have to do is adjust, let's say, my white point, and I could brighten up my image. Okay, so that's all I had to do. Just click the white point, drag it up, and now my image is a bit brighter. Now, what's really neat about this is it's non-destructive, right? So if I was in Photoshop and I grabbed my levels and I cranked it up, let's say crazy, like I went bloop, like that, Photoshop destroys the pixel information. But in here, I could add another grade and go the opposite direction. So I can go this way, and I may have to go more, like 20 or 40 or 60 or 80 or 100. But you can see I haven't lost any of that information. It's actually saving it all still. Okay, which is awesome, because if at some point we need to get back to something that we did too much, we can, because we haven't destroyed that information. It's still sitting in the wings of our image. All right, so I'm just going to pull this down a little bit. We still have a grade on here. You can see that there's an arrow that comes from this, goes into the grade, and then goes there. Think of like water flowing. That's what you should consider. This is our water source. It goes through a grade, and then it ends up in the viewer. So it always has to follow this path to get into the viewer. If this arrow doesn't go there, then we don't have anything in the viewer, so we don't have anything to see. So we have to have something connected to the viewer, and whatever is connected from here into the viewer gets that. All right, so there is that. So now what I want to do is I want to add in my ambient occlusion. So my scene feels a little bit flat, okay? So everything in here, like, it feels like there's not really making contact the way that it should. So I'm going to go and click off into Nowhere Land, and I'm going to go to Shuffle, okay? So over here, here is Shuffle. Now what Shuffle allows us to do is basically it's an extractor, okay? They call it Shuffle because you can do other stuff with it, but we use it as an extractor, something to pull one of those channels out. So I'm going to connect the arrow right here. Now in the Shuffle node, all I have to do is say what channel I want to pull out. So I'm going to pull out the ambient occlusion, and I'm going to rename this AO Shuffle. The hot new dance. Okay. Now if I want to see what that looks like, I need to drag this arrow over to here. Now I can see what the shuffle looks like. I drag the arrow back here, that's what the grade looks like. Okay? So there's the shuffle, there's the grade. Now notice up here I'm not changing it. This is just a viewer. This is just like I want to see it. Okay? It's like hidden. I can see it by going here, but I can't use it unless I shuffle it out. Alright, so now I have this shuffle, I have the grade, I need to put those two things together. Okay? That's where we can come into this guy and we can do a merge. So I want to merge my grade and my shuffle together. So I'm going to click off into Nowhere and go to Merge. Okay? Merge has two connections. It has an A and a B. A is what's going to be on top, and B is what's going to be on the bottom. If you remember that B is bottom, then it shouldn't be an issue because A is on top then. So I'm just going to connect my A to the shuffle and my B to the grade. I can't see it yet until I drag this onto here. Okay? So what it's doing now is imagine Photoshop, right? So we have one layer that's our ambient occlusion. The layer below it is our shuffle. Or sorry, is our grade. Okay? So we have these two layers. Well, we haven't told Photoshop, we haven't told Nuke how to mix these two layers together. So over here on this merge, I'm going to say that this is a multiply. Okay? So now what we're doing is we're seeing what this looks like with the ambient occlusion on top of, multiplied on top of the grade. Now if I take this arrow and I bring it back to grade, and then I drag it back to multiply, you can see the difference. Okay? You can see how there is a difference in what we're viewing. Now, this is kind of annoying to do. I want to just see what it looks like with and without. So if I click on the merge, I'm viewing the merge, and I just hit D, it disables the merge, allowing us to basically just see what it looked like before. So there it is before and after. And you can tell, look at right here, whoopsie, come on. Do you see right there how that all of a sudden feels like it's actually making contact? Like it feels a little bit more realistic in the scene because we have this shadow underneath and this dark line right here and here. And how just like little things like this coffee cup. Watch that. Do you see how now it feels like the book is actually casting a shadow on that coffee cup? How all the books and everything feel a little bit more like in tune to where they're at because of this ambient occlusion. Now I could take this ambient occlusion and I could darken it further. Okay, so right now, if I view it, I just hit 1. This is what it looks like. Okay, so what it does is it takes all of these dark areas, everything that's black, and it multiplies it on top of the color. So anywhere it's black here, it's going to make our other image really dark. Anywhere it's white, it's just going to stay white. It's going to stay the exact same color. Okay. White is a value of 1. Look how my mouse is over the white arrow. Look at the values for the red, green, blue. They're all 1. As my mouse gets over, whoopsie, the black arrows, we're almost at 0. Okay, so just like math class, 1 times anything is the exact same number, and 0 is 0. So when we go here, this darkens that area. Okay, making it feel a little bit more solid there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken this ambient occlusion shuffle. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to go up to my adjustments, and I'm going to go to a grade. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adjust what my ambient occlusion looks like. So I'm going to hit 1 just so you can see it, and then I can play with my black point. So you see how I can drag this black point left and right, and it's either going to lighten the black point or darken, whoa, too much, darken the black point. Okay? Now what that means is the darker this is, the more contact shadows, the more ambient occlusion effect it's going to have. So I go back to this, I hit 1, and then you can really see a bit more of an effect. Now I don't need to be viewing this to change it. The options are right here. Here's grade 2, here's grade 2. So anything I do here is going to affect that. So I can very quickly on the fly just kind of adjust this until I get it to something I like. So let's say I like that. That's good. Okay, and I'm not locked to anything, so I can always come back and adjust it. All right, that's good there. So now what I want to do is I want to add in, let's say, some glow. I need some glow on top of all of my stuff. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to hit the tab key, and I'm going to type in glow. I don't remember where glow is, but I know it's a thing, so I can type in glow. I hit enter, and then it adds a glow into my scene. Okay? Now everything in my scene is glowing because it doesn't know what should be glowing and what shouldn't be glowing. So that's why we have all these options here. Everything inside of Nuke, there's loads of options, lots of things you can do, but there's only certain things we actually need to do. So for this, I need to adjust my width channel. I need to say, hey, I'm going to use the red, green, or blue channel. Let's say I use the green channel, okay, or my incandescence channel, there it is. So my incandescence green is what I'm going to use for my width channel. And this is basically saying, wherever I have this incandescence, I want you to glow. Wherever I have this green channel, I want you to glow. So I can take the brightness up. I can take my size up. I can verify that. Let me see. Incandescence. It should be glowing. I may need to really crank this up to like. There we go. Holy cow. There we go. So maybe 10 is a good number here. And then my size, I can just bump this up to maybe like 120. 140. There we go. Okay. So now you can see again the difference. I click on the glow and I hit D. You can see the difference between the before and the after. Okay. This is why it's important to do your glows in post, because you want the control of it. I want to be able to go in there and control how much glow I'm getting in my scene. And then I can adjust the tolerance too. Down is fine. I could also tint it, so I can click on this color wheel, and I could tint the glows too. So that way I'm giving this kind of more of a bluish color in here. Okay, and I'll take this brightness up to maybe 20. All right, cool. Now what? So now what we can do is go through and maybe add in a our depth of field. Okay. So I'm going to go down here to where it says glow. Somewhere I believe it's. I think it's down here. I think there's a Z depth right here under the layers. Yeah, it's just cut off, I think. So I'm going to click on my glow, I'm going to hit tab, and I'm going to add a Z depth, or sorry, Z defocus. They changed the name of it. So the Z defocus, what this is going to do is it's going to use my color information and actually give us the depth of our scene and allow us to make it fuzzy. So in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my depth channel, and I'm going to specify what my depth is. So here is my depth channel. It's CamZ depth perspective 1 Z. There it is. Okay, so now it's reading the actual depth information. Now I can't see everything. It's obviously everything's blurry. If I grab this focal point and I drop it on any item, like right here in front of the camera, what we're going to see is that, just that. I just changed this to camera Z. I picked a new focal point, and you can see this is in focus, and then we gradually get out of focus as we go back further. And I can adjust the size of that depth by cranking this up or cranking this down. And then same thing here. How much is my maximum blur? And then how much, less do I want that? Okay. And then if I want to change it, I can grab this and then drop it onto my coffee cup. Okay. So now my coffee cup is the focal point. It's still fuzzy just because of how far away it is. But it's definitely my focused object. And because of my screen, I have to constantly start moving stuff around. And again, we can hit D to toggle that on and off. Not a huge effect. I may need to crank this up more. There we go. Okay, so now we've really cranked up that blur, and now we can see that this is in focus, and then that is all blurry. Okay, so way too much for this effect. T20, cool. Okay, so then I can come down here and adjust some other stuff. So I can grab my Z to focus, I can hit the tab key, and I can add stuff like saturation. Okay, again, you can look through these and see if you recognize anything. That's the best way to do it, and then go from there. So if you saw something like saturation, you would say, oh, that probably allows me to desaturate the image, which is what I want to do. If you saw something like hue shift or hue correct or HSV tools, that's going to allow you to adjust your colors. Okay. So on the saturation, I'm going to knock the saturation down a bit. I'm going to add another grade node after this, and I'm going to set this to be a multiply and pull the gain down some. Okay. And then what I want to do is I want to also add on top of this, I want to have basically a vignette. Okay. If you're unfamiliar with a vignette, a regular camera, when you take a picture, it darkens the edges, it darkens the corners of your image, just a natural phenomenon. And what that does, it helps bring your focus into the center of the image. Okay. So I want to create that. So what I'm going to do is click off of here, and I'm going to create a constant. So if I go up to this, I say constant, there it is. So I'm going to take this constant, and I'm going to cut a circle in it. Now before I do that, my constant needs to be the same size as my footage. So I go over here, and I pick the size of my rendering, which is 960 by 540. And then I'm going to go to a roto. So if I go over here to my pen, here's roto. And this is basically your pen tool like in Illustrator or Photoshop. So I'm going to click and drag, click and drag, click and drag, and then click and drag, and then click right there. Okay. Now when I get this, one of the nice things is we have these little sticks sticking out. So I'm going to click and drag the stick. Click this one, click and drag the stick. Click this one, click and drag, the stick. Click this one, click and drag the stick. Cool. So now that I have this, let's view it. So I click on this and hit 1. You'll see that we don't really change anything. It looks pretty much the same. Now the difference is if I were to look at the alpha channel, okay, the transparency. So I hit A, and now I can see the transparency. I can see right at the center, it's really bright white, and then around the edges, it's a bit darker. So I'm going to hit A again to switch out of that. I'm going to go back to my grade and hit 1 so I can view it. So now I'm going to merge these two images together. So I'm just going to click M for merge. This is my A, this is my B. I want to view this, so I hit 1. And what you'll see is that this becomes black right in the center. Okay, now, obviously not what we wanted. So I'm going to first set this to multiply. That's going to basically just white out our whole image. I'm going to go back to my roto, so I just double click it, and then I'm going to invert. Okay, so way over here it says not inverted, so I'm going to say invert. Okay, and what that does is it flips the alpha channel to be opposite. So instead of black and white, it's white and black. Okay, so the center is basically going to be white and the outside will be black. Now I still can't see anything, and the reason for that is because my alpha channel for this is just not apparent. It's not visible, and it's not applying it. When we get here, it's just whiting it out. So I'm going to click on my roto, hit the tab key, and add a pre-mult to it. And that should have worked. Let me see. I've had an alpha here. No. That should be that. And pre-mult. Well, regardless, that's weird. I'm going to leave it as an over. Something might have changed in this. I'm going to leave it as an over, leave this as a roto going into that. Okay. So constant, roto, that's inverted, and then our merge right here set to over. Okay. So now you can see the before and after of that vignette. So you can see the effect of it where our view becomes a bit more centered, a bit more centralized on what we're trying to see there. Okay, we can double click this merge and we can also play with this mix, and that's basically just a transparency for that effect, that blending that's happening. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now here's where this becomes useful beyond just this. Everything that I just did there, if I were to go into Photoshop and have done that, I would have to redo it again for every single image inside of my scene. Okay? If I were to just take this though, I'll scoot this over, and then I hit Control-C to copy it, I clicked off, I did Control-V to paste it, I would have another one. And what I can do is then go over to this image and just double click, click the folder, and then find a different image. So that was number 10. Let's say I went to number 20. Okay, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, click my merge, and view it. And except for the Z defocus, everything else should be locked in. That's a horrible image. Why did I pick 20? Let's go with number 2. There we go. That's a good one. Well, that's pretty similar to the other one, isn't it?
So like the Z-pass and everything will change the image too?
Well, the Z-pass is reading just that one spot still. Okay, so I have to just update that one spot, and then everything else will be cool. Let me grab a different one, because that's a different scene perspective one. I like that one. The same one. What happened to that image? Perspective? No. Oh, I put them in my temp folder. Okay. Alright, I'm just going to grab this number 1 here. There. Alright, so this is my number 1 image, and this is number 10. Okay, so these are basically just 2 images from the same camera. And then I can just go into my Z defocus and then just pick this point. And it's loading. This is what that's doing. Maybe I need to go into my Z defocus and just tweak some settings, just kind of pull that down a little bit, pull this down a little bit. There we go. But you'll see that everything else follows with it. So my glow is still there, my Z defocus is still there, my ambient occlusion is still there, my vignette is still there, my saturation and my grade. So if you were to look at the 2 images that I have here, you would think that these are still part of the same scene. You wouldn't think that these are two completely different renders. And that's usually what happens is you go through Photoshop, you do this, you come out with this image. Then you go in again with the second image. You do a bunch of stuff. Hopefully you come out with something that looks similar. Here, we're like 95% right on. The only thing that's different really is the depth of field has been changed. Okay? Now if we change something like our camera names, that would affect it. If we changed our render pass names, that would affect it. So I'm going to jump over here and paste this again. And I'm going to go up to this and then load in one of my other ones. Now one of my other ones, which is in the temp folder called SlapComp. Okay, so this is one of my early renders I did of my machine. That's not the one I wanted. Something happened, it deleted them. Perspective 1. There we go. Okay, so here's one that's not deleted. Alright, so here's another one, and if I go down to the bottom of this and I hit 1, you'll see that the entire image goes black. The reason is because I rendered from a different camera, so names are different. So all I have to do is just go through and reload the shuffle. So I double click the shuffle, I say it's not perspective 1 AO, it's just regular AO perspective. And if I go down to my Z to focus, it's not camera Z perspective 1, it's just the regular perspective 1. If I go to my glow and say it's the perspective green, there we go. So I changed those 3 spots and now it's back to where it was. And again, I could use this for anything. So a lot of these companies like Macavision and Dassault and Quintec and all the companies that use Nuke, what they do is they create basically just like a pipeline. Okay, here's the pipeline, here's a script. All you have to do is you render your stuff out, make sure things are named like this, drop your image here, and then all the other stuff is set up for you. And then you can just have basically controllers on the right where you can adjust things like glow and specular and whatever else. All the stuff that's here, I could create my own controllers for and set it up so that I basically just have like a widget where I can just click and drag and adjust different things like my Z to focus or like anything. Like my glow. Okay? So here is a set of images that I've done on my previous environment. Okay, and again, this is important to do right from the very beginning of this. So you can see in here, this is, in this one, it's a robotic scene. Okay, so the idea is that this robot is going to take over the world and kill a bunch of people. That's the robot right there. Looks very furious. So what I did was I wanted to set up some camera shots. I wanted to see what is this going to look like, right? I'm excited about it. I want to get in there and actually see what my cameras are going to look like. If I'm super close to this, that cable better look good. If that cable has a crimp in it and my final render, it's going to blow the entire thing. So I need to make sure that it doesn't look horrible. So the entire time I'm doing things. This is all just flat color, ambient occlusion, and depth of field. That's all these 3 things are. Okay. And then I started to add some textures to it. And all these are just projections. None of these are Mari painted textures yet. Okay, and then I'm realizing, holy cow, that's a lot of grain. I really want to up my settings. So I start upping my settings so that I don't have as much grain. Then I start to play with some of my lights. I start to add things like paper. You can see there's paper all over the place. Oops, let me jump back to that one real quick. Remember the cables I showed last time? Look at all the cables just coming out of here. Look how much detail just adding things like cables really adds to your scene. And they don't even have to make sense. Like, this here is basically just a bunch of cubes in that slot. And these cables just like go into the cube. It doesn't make sense. You can't tell it doesn't make sense. It just looks like cables going into the side of a computer. These cables up here, these are all like network cables, but they're all like huge and they intersect each other, but you don't see it, so it doesn't matter, okay? So it's all just stuff that is basically set decoration. It doesn't need to make sense, it just has to look good. It just has to make it feel like the room is actually alive, like there's stuff in the scene. So here's another one, you know, and a lot of this is playing around. This looks too plain. That looks a little bit better having the blue rug there. Let's get a little closer and see what the screens are looking like. And then remember too, I talked about copying your stuff. So this whole setup here of where this desk is and where this computer is, I have here and here. Every time I rendered this, I moved those computers over and then I rendered it out. And when I was done, I just deleted them and then I went back to working on this. Okay? Here's a bunch of books. Now these are my low-res books. These are basically cubes with pictures projected onto the side of it to make it look like a book. Okay, so that's all these are. I went and got pictures of bookshelves, and I found a set of books, and I just literally just like projection mapped it onto the side. Now again, up close it looks kind of horrible, but oh, you can't see it from that angle. There you go. From this angle here, it looks like there's a bunch of books over on the bookshelf. Okay, we can get away with that kind of stuff as long as we're not up on top of it. And that's the point of all of this, is that you see what you can get away with. At this point, I actually probably could get away with it at this resolution. If I raised my resolution and made it a bit crisper, like 4K or even 1920, it probably would fall apart. It probably would look like fake books. Here's my little computer screen. Look how pretty this little lens looks. That's just a picture of a lens that's just right there in front of it with some reflection. That's all it is. Okay? So you have to be on the lookout. Same thing with my speakers. My speakers are just a picture of speakers with a bump map of a picture of speakers on it. That's all it is. But it looks like and feels like an actual speaker. It looks like it has that kind of mesh attached to it. Remember those wires? See, they just kind of come out and they're kind of twisted here. And then these just, like, they're even tied. Like, even put a little piece of tie there and went in. It's the Arcos. That's the computer there. Some buttons here. Some vents. You can see all the detail that's in here. All of these papers. The papers here are, I found 12 or 14 different pieces of paper, just like different scribblings. And I basically just like, here's a texture, and I just duplicated that item all over the place. And that's all I did. There he is again. And again, you see how I'm just changing my angles? I'm playing with different things to see, you know, what's a good angle for this shot? What's a good way to kind of tell the story? Yes, ma'am.
Why did you like copy and paste each tree? Couldn't you just like link the two images into the same tree?
You can't. I can't link the same image in the same tree because it's like water, right? So it has to have some way to merge those two together. So I can merge them together, but I can't have the one do it. Now what I could do is this. This is how I actually got all those images. I'm going to put a dot node here, and what that does is just, it's that. So it makes it easier. So I could take this image, and I could just say, boop, and now it's there. Okay? And then I could grab this image, and then do the same thing. So when I do my renderings, this is how I do it. Is I just have the one node, and I just connect it, and then view it, and then render it out as a separate image. That way I can save all of my images as I go. When you do your portfolio, and realistically that's our end game here. Your end game is portfolio, demo reel, something to show. To be able to show in your portfolio, here is this image, and look at what I did with it, all my planning steps and stages and whatever else, plus I have drawings that I've done. Here's my textures that I've used. And to be able to show all of that stuff is, I'm not going to say it's great filler, but it's great filler, okay? It's a great way to add extra stuff to your portfolio and show how you work, to show your workflow, so they can see your attention to detail. So they can see that things are done actually on purpose. Here's some wheels. Look at those wheels. Gorgeous wheels. Whoops. And then I decided, what if this was nighttime? So the idea with this is that the scientist creates an artificial intelligence. The artificial intelligence becomes too smart, and then he decides that humans need to be destroyed. So then he just takes over. So the kind of person that would do this kind of thing is someone who is probably working at night in a dark lab, not in the middle of a bright lab. So then I went with this, so it's kind of like a night scene. Like maybe the scientist is sneaking in at night to work on his project, and then things go haywire. So again, it's a different way to tell the story. It's a different way to light the scene. I can actually get away with more stuff because now it's darker in the scene, right? So my books that were kind of horrible in bright light are now actually a little bit easier to work with. And my screen, look at that. I can really emphasize some of these things inside the screen. Okay, and a lot of these shots are the same exact shot. They're just shot from a different, same angle but different stuff on there. And you can see the pipes up here. You can see these lights up there. You get away with a lot of lighting stuff because you don't really have a lot of lights in the scene. So then you can, do that kind of thing. And most of my focus is on this. But if you don't have this picture in your mind when you're working in Maya, you don't know what to adjust. You don't know that, okay, this is looking kind of boring over here. I need to add some lab coats and a little handprint thing right there. And I don't think I have a close-up of that one in this image. No, but the handprint thing actually has like a handprint on it. Like I went into, not crazy detail, but I went into some nice detail on it. And then the point of this where I stopped, or I'm not stopped, but I'm currently working on is building a scientist that would be laying on the floor. Because you need that. And let's see this. Yep, there's his clothes. So that's where we're working. Anything else in there that I need? Yeah, there's another image just from a little bit further away. Okay, but all these start at the same thing. They all start with just kind of understanding. Here's my foundation. Let's set up ambient occlusion. Let's set up depth of field. And then incandescence is another one. And then just to show inside of Maya, there is no incandescence way to render stuff out of here. So it has to be basically a separate pass. They used to have it built in. Maybe they still do. It's just hidden somewhere. But I haven't been able to find it yet. So let's say that I wanted this sign to be a glowing sign, that I wanted to add something to it. This is where I would use those render layers, and I believe I showed this before. Render setup. I'm going to close this, and I'm going to close this. All right. So inside of here, I'm going to delete this one just because I don't want to confuse you. I didn't have that one before. I'm going to create a brand new layer. Okay, so this is going to be my incandescence. And I'm going to make a new collection. So I right click on this and I say create collection and I say items. Doesn't matter what you call that. Then I'm going to go to my outliner and I'm basically just going to grab everything in my scene except for my stuff that is very specific to V-Ray. Because in this case I'm just going to show how to do it in Mental Ray, because V-Ray actually I believe does have an option to do it. So now I have everything, I say add. Okay, so now all these items are inside of this rendering. If I click on the eyeball, yes, I can see all the stuff that's inside of this view. So now if I want this thing to glow, what I can do is, I'm going to deselect my sign, and I'm just going to put a new material on this. And my new material is going to be a Maya surface shader, and it's going to be completely black. Okay, so that's completely black. Then I'm going to grab this. I'm going to put a new material on here, and I'm going to put a surface shader, and I'm going to make it whatever color I want. Okay, so like on my computer screens, I just mapped the picture of my computer screens back onto it. Okay, in this case it's a solid color, so I'll just map any solid color. Typically I like to do red, green, or blue, so I'll grab one of these three colors because those are easier. And then when I go ahead and render this, what you're going to see is that I'm going to get solid colors, okay? So I get this solid red right here. And if I were to have something in front of it, like really dramatic scene, right, like this. Come on. All right, let's just scoot this over so we can make it a little bit more dramatic. The ambient occlusion on this green looks really nice. There we go. So now we're really dramatic here, and we render this out. Hey, what? Something didn't apply. Hold the phones. I'm going to go up here and just say all objects off. Just select geometry, marquee all my geometry, deselect this. And then let's try to grab that surface shader again. There we go. So now what we should get is basically the black bar should be covering up the Dionysus like this, okay? And then when I go into Nuke and I render this, or I read this node in, work, and environment, images, temp, that's it there, yes, there it is. You'll see that I have just that red, just as a separate image, and then I can read in my original image. So I'm going to go back to this, render layer manager, view my original image. And I'm just going to drop on here just a basic material. Cool. So I'll read that into here too. Alright, so here's my original image, here's this. And so what I'm going to do, because these are two separate images, I can actually put these together into one image. So that way I can use it for a glow. Or I can just tell this one, oops, click the right button, tell this one I want to glow. And then when it says, where do you want this width channel to come from? Can't grab that. I guess I do have to copy it in there. Things would stop changing. All right, so I'm going to take this, and I'm going to hit K for copy. And what this is going to do is it's going to copy the red channel, which is why I chose red as the color for this. So it copies the red information into a brand new channel in here, called Dionysus dot sign. There we go. Yes. All right. So now when I create my glow, and then I go to my width channel, you'll see that that's now a new thing, and then I can make just that area glow. Okay, and then this also has on it my depth of field. It also has my ambient occlusion. And those are all things I could add to this to make, again, this scene seem a little bit more realistic. So I can take this and go to merge. Yes, sir.
I've seen in car renderings where they render out the alpha channels.
Mm-hmm.
So they get an alpha channel at every scene, every angle, every shot. So it makes it a lot easier for retouching. Is this how they do that? Is they just want another pass?
Right. They just want a way to separate it. So like on cars, not only are they rendering out things like depth and ambient occlusion, but they're rendering out diffuse. Okay. So what happens is in here, I have a Mila on this. So in here we have a diffuse. So what Maya does is it says, okay, I'm going to take your color that you've chosen, I'm going to take the lighting, and I'm going to put those two things together. And that will give you some sense of shading. Now you have reflection. Now we'll add that on top of it. Now you have transparency. We'll add that on top of it. So for a car, they actually separate all of those things out. Your diffuse, your reflection, your specularity, your shadows, your lights.
Also do body paint, glass,
right.
molding.
Yeah. And they do that for every single piece of the car, right? So they're doing it for all the sheet metal. They're doing it for the headlights. They're doing it for the wheel. They're doing it for the caps. They're doing it for any logos or anything they want.
And those are just passes?
Those are passes, but they're also using the render layer manager. So in here, they would actually have everything kind of separated so that they would have this piece and this piece and this piece all inside here. And they have, at some of the big houses, they have scripts. So basically you would grab all of your stuff, make sure it's labeled correctly, and it would say all the sheet metal goes here, all the plastic goes here, all the rubber goes here, all the lights are going to go here, and so on. And then when they hit the render button, there it goes. There. So now you can see here with the ambient occlusion how much that really adds the depth of that. And then we can use our Z to focus. There we go. We'll choose our depth from here. And the reason I'm getting so many choices from this is because it's picking up all the stuff from everything else in my scene. So if I just close this, and then I see which one this is just depth. There we go. You can also view this too. This is kind of a neat thing. If you go to focal plane setup, you can see, like, when I click the dot and pick on something, that might not have been the right one. Is it that one? I guess it was just the depth. Yeah. Okay. So that one was reading just as depth. So now you can see where that line is, and then as I take my depth of field up, you can see how it's actually isolating just those areas to be in focus. And then when we turn this off, it is a soft edge, yeah. We turn that off, we look at our glow, we can crank up our blur. You can see the effect we get. Now this angle and this geometry that we have right here isn't high enough res to get a good enough image, so we are getting some like weird stuff here and there. But for the most part, you know, it gets the idea across, okay? Once our settings are up, it'll help blend those things in a little bit better. All right. So when you're rendering your stuff out or when you're working, I recommend, like today, I would set up a little rendering so that you can see what it's going to look like when you come in. If you're using Mental Ray, then you would just go to your scene and choose depth and ambient occlusion. Give it a little bit of distance for ambient occlusion. If you're using V-Ray, then you would go to your render elements, there it is, and then you would choose your depth here, and then you would choose your extra texture, and then you would just map to the extra texture the V-Ray dirt, and then you could adjust that radius right here. Okay. Now another little trick that I'll do, I want to render out 4 or 5 or 6 different images. I don't want to have to wait after each one to hit the render button again. So I'll create a new camera, and I think I showed this last time too, because it works all in the same fashion. You just set up your camera where you want it to be. So I'm going to set my focal length to, let's say, 10. That's kind of a neat angle there. Now it looks really distorted, but whatever. I'm at frame 1, so I'm just going to hit S to set my key. I'm going to go to frame 2. I'm going to grab a different angle and then set a key. Go to frame 3, find a different angle, set a key. So now when you come back in, all you have to do is load those 3 images in a Nuke, and then you can play with the ambient occlusion, play with the depth, and then play with your other stuff, and it all blends together. Now here's another nice thing about Nuke is that, let me go back to this first image. Now here it's not going to work as fluidly as we would hope it would or like it to, but it makes sense of why. So there we go. All right, so here's my original image. So what I'm going to do is click on this, click on the first image, and instead of this being individual images, I'm going to say bring in a sequence. So what it'll do now is it'll actually bring in a sequence of images, that one, instead of just this single image. And what that means is that if I were to have images 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, all I would have to do is just go to the next frame. There's what the next frame looks like. There's where my next camera shot looks like. There's where my next whatever looks like. And so then I could do all my adjustments right on it. I can go to here and say I want my Z to focus to now be over here. Okay, and then I can go to my next frame, where I'm at right here, and I can move this up there. Now this is actually a pass. I wanted to do a little pass just to see how my camera would move across the scene. So in this case, there's not like 5 different frames, but it would work the exact same way. If I had my test render
How do you export? Can you export a sequence?
out of here, yeah. The same way that we would read something, we would write it the opposite way. So I'll show that in a second. All right, so here's my other ones. Here's a little test with a head. That's actually my head. Looks just like me. Yeah, so if I was trying to write something out of here, that's what we would do. So let me just copy this over here. And look at how great this is, just to be able to pop it over here and then just see what it looks like. So we would go to a write node. Okay, so same thing as this, write, read, and write. And then we would say I want to write this out. So I would say test images dot pound 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 because we have a sequence. And then whatever kind of file you want. So you want TIFFs, Targas, whatever, you just type in the extension. And it'll know, oh, you chose Targa. Then we hit render, okie dokie, and it renders out those 23 images. Now, the downside of Nuke when you're running Maya is that if you're rendering, Nuke slows down immensely. So I don't recommend trying to use Nuke and Maya at the same time, or rendering in Maya and using Nuke at the same time, because that's very difficult to do. Was there one other thing I wanted to show? Yes, there was.